Welcome back to Podcasting for Real Estate Pros, where agents learn to attract clients, build trust, and stand out with the power of podcasting. Let's dive in. Okay, you're already doing the work, the open houses, the emails, following up leads. So why not let your podcast do some of the talking for you and a little bit of the heavy lifting? Hey, it's me, Sue Willoughby, your host for Podcasting for Real Estate Pros. So today we're digging into real estate specific ways to promote your podcast without adding more work to your plate. I know, I got it. Okay, because if you're already out there hustling in your market, then your podcast should be working with you and not sitting quietly in the corner hoping that someone notices it. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel here. You just need to weave your podcast into the things that you're already doing, into your listings, into your bios, into your emails, client conversations, and yes, your social media posts. So let's turn every touch point into a podcast promo moment without sounding like a broken record, of course. You've got a new listing, pair it with a podcast episode. For example, hey, just listed a fixer-upper. If you're thinking about buying a house that needs a little bit of work, then check out my latest episode on what to watch out for before making an offer. Link in my bio or just search whatever your podcast name is. Next up is your bio. Your podcast belongs in your bio, period, the end. Instagram. Put in your Instagram profile or bio, host of whatever your podcast name is, followed by weekly tips for buyers and sellers, or whatever it is that the focus of your podcast is going to talk about. In your email signature, add a one-liner under your name. Put in there podcast, and then a link to the podcast. In Zillow, Realtor.com, LinkedIn, wherever you're listed, add your podcast to those bios. Don't just say, I'm passionate about helping people buy and sell homes. Say, I host a podcast that demystifies the process for first-time home buyers every week. Follow me and get new tips, so on and so forth. You get the idea. That's trust on autopilot. People say, oh, wow, this agent has a podcast. That's pretty cool. I'm going to start listening. Then they tune in and you've got a new client. You've got a new listener. You're off to the races. Also, when you're doing open houses or you've got a buyer's guide or some other collateral, printed material, it would be really helpful to create a QR code, because if it's on paper or if it's in print, then they can't actually click on a link. But if it's got a QR code, you can actually include all of your contact information in that QR code, which, of course, includes your podcast. So on open house flyers, even on your signs, put a QR code. In brochures, in buyer and seller guides. I'm telling you, QR code can have everything in there because people can't click a link on a print product. Have a little tagline that says something like, want more tips like this? Scan here to listen to my latest episode on, and then whatever your clever hooky title is. Now your paper trail builds a relationship. Your newsletters are a great way to build value and also add information about your podcast. So instead of saying something in your newsletter like, the market is shifting. Yeah, big deal. Everybody knows that. However, if you say something like, in this week's podcast episode, I share what the rising rates really mean, especially if you're buying before the end of the year. It gives you context, it gives insight, and it'll give them you and your information in their inbox with a clear call to action. So in your DMs and in your text scripts, let's say that clients tend to ghost you after a showing. You can send them a message that says something like, hey, no pressure, but I just recorded a short podcast episode on what to do if you're unsure about making an offer. Here's a link. It's casual, it's helpful, and it keeps the conversation going. It's also going to make them curious, like, hey, what is this podcast all about? And are there other episodes on here that might be of interest to me? Here's some common mistakes and pitfalls that you should avoid. Avoid making the podcast feel like a separate thing. It should feel like it's part of your ecosystem seamlessly. Another thing is waiting for people to just find it. The odds of them stumbling upon your podcast are slim to none. So think of it as promotion, not salesy or pushy. You're talking about something that actually adds value. Think of it this way. Podcasting is just you showing up in another form for your people. It's not spam. It is service. You're providing value. So think of it that way, and then it will seem less cringy. Your podcast isn't something extra like a side project. It's a brand asset. So make it part of the conversation, whether you're online, offline, or everywhere that you're showing up already, whether you're at a networking event or you're standing in line at the grocery store. Just keep it in the conversation. Okay, super easy to promote your podcast as part of your being, part of your ecosphere. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about guests, how to use them strategically to grow your reach and build your authority and expand your network like a pro. Until then, don't keep your podcast a secret. Please, you've worked really hard on it. Make it a signature. Listening is awesome, but real progress starts with clarity. If you're curious about podcasting for your business, then let's connect. Book a quick call so that we know where you're at and what you need to do next. The link is in the show notes. Book your call today.